The Ramchal had said yesterday that although God is good on the absolute level, what is the value of evil? The value of evil produces phenomenal fruits. Why? Because the person succeeds and is not tempted by evil, and he rejects evil despite the overwhelming power that evil has over mankind. Then you're worthy of the ultimate level of what? Of reward. Because despite the challenge, you succeeded. So the fruits, the positive that emanates from this evil is because when one doesn't do evil, despite the difficulty, then you've succeeded. So that's the positive side of evil. Now it's interesting. This week we read, it's a double portion. The second portion is called B'chul Kosai. If you follow my statutes and you observe the mitzvos, you study them, you retain them, and you actualize them, you'll be worthy of unlimited bounty. Now, what does it mean if you follow my statutes, if you toil in my Torah? It's not study my Torah, you have to toil. You have to be willing to forego certain comforts of life, amenities of life, for the sake of the study of Torah. And when you study at this level, it's so you should be able to internalize it and appreciate its value to actualize it in the most perfect way. And if you do this, you merit the ultimate. But it's called a statute. Why is it a statute? We understand a statute is something we can't understand on a rational level. For instance, dietary laws. Why are they not permitted? It's kosher species, but if it's not ritually slaughtered as prescribed by the Torah, it's considered not kosher. But if you do it the way the Torah prescribes, then it is kosher. It's a statute, because that's God said it. A Jew is not permitted to wear a combination of wool and linen. That's a statute. The red heifer is a statute. It's the ultimate level of statute. That even King Solomon wasn't able to, with his unequaled level of wisdom, King Solomon wasn't able to fathom the profundity of what the red heifer was. All other statutes he understood. What is the statute aspect of studying of Torah? That you must toil. That's the question. Now, the Rambam writes in the laws of Talmud Torah, to what point does one have an obligation to study Torah? Until the moment you die. Why? Because the moment you stop studying, you begin forgetting. And since a Jew has the obligation to retain whatever he studied, so if stopping, even for a moment, causes one to forget, you have no right to forget. So you have to be continuously involved in engaging in the process for the sake of retention. That's what you have to do. Because the moment you stop, you begin forgetting. Now, when was forgetting introduced into existence? When? Now, initially, when God created Adam and Eve, this is before the sin of the tree of knowledge. Death was not a reality in existence. It was only as a result of eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge was death introduced. The Gemara tells us that if one would experience the pain and the grief of the first moment that one loses a loved one, and you would experience it for the rest of your life at that level, depth of intensity of grieving, you would not be able to survive it. You'd be so emotionally distraught, it would totally consume you, and ultimately you would die. So what did God do? He gave a gift to humanity. It's called forgetting. You see, time heals. Even though you may remember the event vividly and clearly, but the emotional connection to that moment the pain of the moment will start fading. So you may recall identically, vividly, exactly the moment and how it happened. But the emotional connection to that moment, that will fade. And it's essential because otherwise humanity cannot function. So forgetting is a gift of God for humanity because death was introduced into existence. If Adam wouldn't have sinned with the tree of knowledge, with death wouldn't have been part of the human condition, there's no reason to forget. But you realize, but once man is endowed with this gift of forgetting, it's a gift, because otherwise you become non-functional. Now you study Torah. Man forgets. How do you not forget? You have to review. You have to keep engaging. So only due to the death, that death was introduced to existence, which is a derivative of evil. Because you only die because man ingested evil and became part of his being. And since man was meant to be eternal, but you can't be eternal if you have evil. That's why man has to die, to decompose, and then he's resurrected in that pure state. But until then, you're subject to death because of the evil you contain. Therefore, forgetting is part of the human condition. You study unless you review, and review continuously. The moment you detach yourself for a moment, you begin forgetting. Therefore, Rambam writes, a Jew has an obligation to study Torah till the last moment of existence, because the moment he stops, immediately he begins forgetting. And a Jew is not permitted to forget. One of the statutes of Torah is what we're speaking about, that God established a condition, human condition, you forget, and therefore you have to continue study and study and study. But why? I just studied a moment ago. You cannot detach yourself. As long as you're alive, you cannot detach yourself. Because the moment there's a detachment, there's a consequence. The consequence is lack of clarity. It doesn't mean you don't have recall of the fact. The vibrancy, the energy, which the Torah provides, that we're touched by the study of Torah, that energy immediately wanes. Give you an example. The Chavetz Chaim writes that a person eats and you're nourished properly. That nourishment, that infusion of nourishment in the body allows the body to function. But as from moment to moment, that nourishment is consumed by the body. You don't feel it immediately because you're fully sated in a healthy way. But if you let a day pass, 2 days pass, 3 days pass, where that nourishment is being consumed by the body, you begin feeling the lack of nourishment. You need a new infusion of nourishment, and you have to continuously be infused with nourishments we have to eat every once in a while to have that energy source, because the body consumes it. Man is meant to be eternal. What level of energy do you need? What energy does the mitzvah have to contain to be able to maintain you for all eternity? When a person goes to the world to come, what is the source of the energy of a soul? The expansion, the magnification, and ultimately the resurrection that exists forever without any degree of toil. No more you no longer have choice. It's based on what we accomplished in this lifetime. When we were physical beings, when we met challenges. So the mitzvah had to generate enough energy, enough spiritual nourishment that it infuses the soul eternally, that it could exist forever due to that energy that was infused due to the mitzvah. That is the concept of doing a mitzvah. And that's what we say, Schar B'Al Maleka, read Pirkei Avos. You could live thousands of years. There's not enough time in the physical existence that you can be compensated for doing a mitzvah. Because when it generates, the energy it generates, which is the ultimate, it keeps you going forever. The physical world is not forever. Therefore, God cannot reward you in this world for a mitzvah. I just read, schar mitzvah mitzvah. In this world, what is the reward for a mitzvah? Doing another mitzvah. Because the energy that's generated, it creates a momentum that it draws you to do more of it. That's the concept of schar mitzvah mitzvah. The reward for mitzvah, God gives you another opportunity, no other mitzvah. But the actual energy itself, that's held for another time. That has no relevance to this existence. The statute of Torah is, although you have to study it unceasingly, because as Rambam says, the moment you stop studying, you forget. But what is the upside of that? Every moment, due to that shortcoming in humanity, will force to continue studying. And it's not easy to study, to review, and not to leave a moment unattended, not invested. So the negative generates what? Generates a tremendous positive. Because I have no choice but, I'll give you an example. Person chooses not to breathe. You can only hold your breath so long. Because if you want to live, naturally you cannot hold your breath beyond a certain point. The Talmud tells us that if a person takes an oath, he will not sleep for 3 days. It's considered an oath in vain. Why? Because it is impossible for a person to stay awake for 3 days. To say you're not going to eat it for 3 days, that's a valid oath. But an oath that you're not going to sleep, since it's impossible to God create a human being, that you shouldn't doze off within 3 days, it's an oath in vain. There's certain things which are realities. If you want to hold your breath, you can only hold to a certain point, unless you strangulate yourself. But if you're fully in a position to breathe, you cannot restrain your breath more than a certain period of time because you have to breathe. It's a reality. You have no choice. You must study. Why must we study? Because our predicament is that since we have the evil of the tree of knowledge, we have forgetting. If you forget, you have to study. You have to study what you studied. But every time you study, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. One word of Torah is the equivalent of all 613 mitzvos. So how much is generated due to the impetus and the setting that we have to study? We have no choice but to study. But that's really toiling. You have to make that extra effort. When you toil not to forget, it brings it to another level. But why don't you want to forget? For the sake of intellectualism? Or for the sake, because the only way you can live as a proper Jew, you have to have your house in order, knowledge-wise, to know exactly how to do, and you need that energy to be committed to do it qualitatively speaking. So the negative, which is forgetting, generates an unbelievable positive aspect to it. Evil is evil. What's the value of evil? Not to do evil. Despite the challenge, we don't do evil. So what are the fruits of not doing evil? It's unbelievable quality fruits. It generates a good, one of a kind of good. If you want to be challenged, the value is not the same. But despite the challenge, you do the right thing. So what does that demonstrate? It displays a level of dedication, which is one of a level of dedication. So the chok, the statute of studying in this week's reading, if you follow my statutes and you retain my mitzvos and you actualize them, the bounty is unlimited. Why? Because you went against the grain. Naturally, we're drawn after the inclination, inertia, be let alone. But here, despite that, understanding what's at cost, we don't let a moment go, and we invest it continuously, despite the difficulty. And if you do it despite the difficulty, then you merit the ultimate, because you're willing to compromise your physicality for the sake of the spirituality. That's the understanding. Therefore, you merit unlimited, as you lived a life which was unlimited, unceasing, the benefit is unceasing. But it has to be continuous. The statute of Torah is you have to continue learning. Because of the evil of the tree of knowledge, that caused forgetting. Because death, we need forgetting is an integral part of survival. But once we have that Achilles heel called forgetting, that handicap, it covers the full gamut. Whether it's something personal, whether it's something spiritual, you have to, for that, you have to continuously engage. But the continuous engagement, which is going against the grain, generates something which is the ultimate positive. It's like the intensity of the evil, the temptation, and if you were able to withstand the temptation, the result of that has greater value than where you're not tested. Because you didn't meet that same level of challenge.